Good morning, good afternoon to all the attendees to the second edition of IBDoc Talk. This is my name is Colin Shaw. I work with Buhlmann Diagnostics, and I've spoken with or worked with most of you throughout the last couple of years on IBDoc, and we're here to discuss some tips and tricks teleconference. So thanks for joining us for this event. We had this event first time last year in about the same time in October of 2018, and the goal back then was try to have these every 3 to 6 months, and things got put on hold and got pushed off, but we're back again for second round. So there's been a lot of input and a lot of feedback. Thank you for everybody that has provided that feedback. So for this year's event, we have Pearl Avery and Barb Harbers to attend and provide some participate with their own testimonials. I got to be able to move the slides forward. So with that in mind, the goal. This first started about a year ago, like I said, and came up with the idea because every time we worked with any portal or setting up a new site or getting feedback or asking technical questions, every person healthcare practitioner that I spoke with had a different idea about what worked well or what they were trying to improve or what new steps they've learned and how it works best to use IBDoc. And so instead of having all that information just go into a vacuum, we figured it'd be a good way to put this all together and do a second round of teleconferences. So thank you to Stacy Smith, who coordinated this whole event with everybody and sent out the emails directly to you to invite you, and put the webinar together and coordinated the WebEx. So I very much appreciate that. We also have Milva online here. Milva's been taking over technical support for IBDoc and supporting quite a few of you, so you may not have met her yet, but she has communicated with you and helped a lot of your patients. So the goal of this discussion is basically, like I said, to get the clinical users from the now 40 portals across Canada to communicate and open a dialogue. As you can see, I try to do a star map across all the portals across Canada, and have 2 new ones in Saskatchewan that are live and are going to go live. So right now we have a total of 40 portals, which is up from last year at this time we had 26 portals. So there's been a significant growth and uptake of using IBDoc. And obviously the goal is to try to get everybody from each one of those sites to have some way to communicate to each other about what's working well, what's not, and an open dialogue forum. So. Also, with that in mind, I mentioned that we have Pearl Avery on the line. So Pearl is from the UK, so this is now an international event. Pearl has used IBDoc for quite some time, and she has worked with quite a few of the IBD healthcare practitioners in Canada through multiple conferences. So we were excited to get her to participate in this with a testimonial. So just to give some brief background for the tips and tricks teleconference for the UK, there's a big difference in how IBDoc's used across the world. Currently, obviously, you guys have your own awareness of how IBDoc's used at your clinic in Canada. Just to give you an update, UK, there's currently one IBDoc portal in the UK at this time, and that's at Pearl's site. So Pearl has a very good first-hand knowledge of it, and they're looking to expand, but there is no pharma funding for IBDoc, so it's based on their own internal funding or trying to get NHS or government funding. Whereas if you looked at Ireland, it's almost 100% funded, and there's 22 clinics. So you can see how those two correlate very well. And by far the largest user is since 2014, they have over 700 patients using IBDoc, and we actually have one of the slides presenting some of their data that they presented. So for an outline for the edition of IBDoc Talk, actually the second edition, is the welcome and introduction, which is now over. And then we'll jump into the testimonials from Barb and Pearl. and then we'll open it up for an open mic. So at any time, any of the attendees right now should be on mute in order to reduce the background noise. But if anybody has any questions or wants to ask any questions, we would love to have participation. We would love to have this be an open dialogue format. So in order to do that, please go down to the question area on the box and raise your hand or type a question, and we will try to introduce or remove your mute so you can participate. After that, if the open mic is not fruitful and there is not a lot of interaction, then we'll jump on to some of the frequently asked questions, and then we can present some of our new pending IBDoc updates that are coming around. And then if still open mic isn't moving and there's not a lot of interaction, then I also have some slides, very good perspectives to walk through, and some recent publications. So with that in mind, I'll bring up the next slide, which is to introduce Barb Harbers, who is an IBD nurse navigator in Lethbridge out of Chinook Regional Hospital. She is a clinical user and a clinical administrator for her portal. She's very much an Calprotectin proponent, has used Calprotectin or IBDoc internally since June of 2018 when we set up her portal. Prior to that, she was also involved in the initial IBDoc first Canada study out of Alberta and was an external site running IBDoc. So she has more than a couple years of experience in IBDoc, and we'll give her the platform to provide her testimonial. Hello, Barb, are you available? Are you here?
I certainly am. Thanks, Colin. Okay, I've never done anything like this before, so I apologize to the group in general for trying to do this, but this is a little bit new for me. Yeah, as Colin said, I've been using IBDoc internally within our own portal since June of 2018, and we've had what I think is really good success here in Lethbridge. We serve approximately 300,000 people in our area, and right now I follow about 400 patients with inflammatory bowel disease. As here in Lethbridge, we only have myself and two gastroenterologists to do all that work. So there's a lot to follow and a lot to keep up with on these patients, and they're not always easy to contact or easy to get testing done and that sort of thing. And with the remote nature of where our patients are, we have a lot of rural patients that sometimes can't get into appointments, or it's just more difficult for them to sometimes get tests off and that sort of thing. So when IBDoc was first introduced to us, at that point it was just myself and one gastroenterologist, and we kind of bought in hook, line, and sinker to the program because we could see the benefit right away. Right away with patients being in the rural setting. And so we started it off, and as we, kind of each patient that came in that we had on, kind of 5-ASA medications, or we were using Cortiment or budesonide, we said to them, okay, this is the program we have, and we'd like to kind of get you involved. And with very few exceptions, patients were definitely interested in having this option, whether they lived in town or were in a rural setting. They could see as well the benefits of the program in having a little bit more control in their disease and in better understanding of what was going on in their own disease process as well. So I think at this point, if I'm correct, I should have looked at numbers, and I apologize for not, but I believe right now I have about 92 patients enrolled in this program, and there's only 6 or 8 that we haven't been able to get working in the program, and that's mostly due to phone issues as opposed to anything else. And so it's been an interesting run over the last year and a half, and there's been a lot of ups and downs and difficult issues and just things that we've run into that we didn't prepare for when we first started. But I've definitely learned a few things, and I think I'd just like to pass along a couple of things that I've learned that I found have been helpful if you're training people in the program or trying to get people to buy into the program, I guess. So the first thing that I noticed was having access to the app on the phone. So it's one thing for a patient to say, yep, I've got a phone that fits, and you really do have to double check that because it changes every once in a while, and so you have to be very aware of the phones that are acceptable to the program. But that's not the only issue, because sometimes patients just don't quite get how to access the app or how to download it properly, or truly how to navigate the app once they get on it. And so what I do now is, when I first introduce a patient to this program, is we sit with their phone, we open it up, we download the app right in front of me so I can see how it's working, and we kind of just navigate the portal a little bit, even though they can't log in yet, but we kind of go through the things that they're going to need to get started right away. That way I know that at least they've seen it and they know what they're looking for, and we know they can access the app and it's already in their phone. Because I've certainly had patients where I've gotten them into the program, and then we thought everything was fine, and then they phone me the day later and they're like, Barb, I can't get this to work. There's something wrong. And then we're playing back and forth and bringing them back into clinic, or trying to deal with it over the phone or over email, which is a bit more difficult for sure. So it's just something I've learned face to face. Do the app right there in front of them and open everything up and get it going so they know what's happening. So that was kind of my first big learning curve for me. The second thing we kind of ran into was the camera function. And so I make it very clear to my patients that the app does all the work for them. It will open the camera when it needs to use the camera, so that they don't have to worry about that. Because some of my older patients, and I have patients up to the age of 82 using this app, so some of them are definitely more phone friendly than others. And so for some of them, they didn't know, when do I have to open the camera, or how do I use the camera? And I'm like, you don't have to. The app will do all that for you. But the first thing that happened to us with about our third or fourth patient, I think, he went to do his test, and it failed. I can't remember the reason the test failed, but it failed. No problem. He had 2 kits, so I just said, go ahead and repeat it using the next kit. So he went ahead and did it, and it was the next day. So he phoned me a couple of hours later and said, well, there's a problem with the app. And I said, well, what's the problem? And he said, well, I can't get the camera it's not testing the camera. And at this point, I didn't realize that the testing of the camera function only occurs every few months. It's preset that way, so that if the patient had tested the camera the day before and using a kit and then had to reuse another kit the next day, it won't ask to test the camera. So the poor patient was beside himself, thinking he'd done something wrong and it was broken, and what had I done? So I now learn to tell patients that as well when I'm doing the first introduction to the program, that the camera test function only occurs every few months, which is really how often we're supposed to be doing the IBDoc. But in some cases, if there's a fail and they repeat it the next day, that test isn't going to come up. So it's just a clarification for them. My next point on the slide here is to not open the app until the second part of the test. So what I had happen, and these are things I've experienced, so that's why I'm sharing them. I've had patients, they would open the app right away, they would collect their stool sample, but they would miss that little part that they had to leave it sit for at least 2 hours. And this is usually the first time going through the program, or if it's been a few months and they've forgotten, that can happen as well. And so as they continue to follow the app, they just keep going right through. So the sample hasn't sat for the 2 hours it needs to process. They continue through the app, the windows on the app, and they do their slide, and then they go to take the picture, and of course it doesn't work because nothing's been processed. So to alleviate that whole confusion, I mean, our kits come with a really lovely pictogram to follow through. If you're having trouble collecting the stool sample, it shows you how to do it. So what I tell patients now is, collect your stool sample. Don't even bother opening the app on your phone. Collect your stool sample, put it on your counter, carry on with your day. When you come back after your 2 hours or 6 or 8 or whatever it is that you're going to do the second half of the test, then open up your portal. Open up the app, carry on. You'll have to scroll through a few slides, but once you get to the second half, then carry on, because really it just saves a lot of grief, and we know that they've done their 2 hour kind of window wait. And that's actually worked a lot better for my patients, and they found that a lot easier to go on. And then my last point here, and this has actually just happened recently, because I have patients that are now repeating their tests now at the 3 or 6 month mark, and it didn't click into my head either to check the expiry dates on the kits they had, but some of them had expired kits, and they will not work, we discovered. They will run the test, but they won't give you a response, or they'll give you a not applicable or something to that effect. And so I always ask my patients now to make sure they check the expiry dates on their kits before they use them. If there's a problem, they can always contact me, and then I'll get them new kits. So those are just some of the things I learned over the last year and a half, and I do really, as Colin said, I'm a big proponent of this program. I think the IBDoc has been an amazing addition to our care. We've seen patients definitely have a better understanding of what's going on within their own disease process, because a lot of our patients also have an amount of irritable bowel syndrome on top of their inflammatory bowel disease. And so often they can't necessarily tell the difference between some of their symptoms. And so at that point, I let them use their IBDoc. And if it tells them it's normal, it gives them a different sense of how they should treat what's going on. And then we can still have a conversation about it for sure, but it does give them a better idea of what's actually happening within their own body. People have been very keen to do it, to the point where I've had patients go out and buy new phones so that they can get onto this program if their phone didn't work. So it's a bit crazy, but for here, in the way our practice works, it has been very helpful for me to kind of monitor my patients on a regular basis if they can't come in to see me, and to also give us some ideas of what's happening in a really urgent setting. If they're sick, it's another test we can do to see what's actually going on. So I really think it's one of the better things we've had in our program since I started working this program, and so I fully believe it's one of the things that it should be able to be offered up to every patient with Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, because it would save a lot of us a lot of work in a lot of respects. So yeah, I guess that's kind of if it's a testimonial, there's my testimonial, and I'm happy there's questions to answer any, if I have answers. I'm not sure, but sure.
Barb, thank you very much. That was great. That was wonderful. You apologized in the very beginning for not having have done this before, but that sounds like you're a pro, and I think it all comes down to the fact that you are so passionate about caring for your patients, and you've obviously put a lot of energy into learning how to work with them to optimize their treatments, and obviously Calprotectin is helping you do that, and specifically with IBDoc. So pretty amazing to hear that you have a patient that's 82 years old using IBDoc. You have a patient that decided to go out and buy a whole phone for IBDoc. You have over 90% compliance with getting your patients to use IBDoc, which I can tell you is probably the biggest issue that we deal with all the time. And after training the site and then having them send out the IBDoc to their first set of patients and actually having the patients follow up. So there's definitely a broad diversity of interest that healthcare practitioners provide when training their patients, and it sounds like what you're doing is working very well. It's hard to see if there's any questions, but if anybody has any specific questions, if you want to, at some point, you can go to the dashboard and type in a question or raise your hand, and we'll unmute you and get you involved to directly ask a question or interact here. But thank you, Barb. If I don't see any other questions, we'll move on to the next slide. And Barb's going to hang on and participate with us in the end and be able to answer questions as well as we go further through the slides. So now we're pulling in Pearl Avery from the UK. I failed to introduce Amanda Appleton, and I'm sorry for that. Amanda represents Buhlmann throughout UK and Ireland, and she's done an amazing job with all the usage and the training and of Calprotectin and with IBDoc in the UK. And so she's introduced Pearl to us, and she coordinated with Pearl to present some information that we at ECHO a few different last year. So please let me introduce Pearl Avery. She's an IBD nurse specialist out of Dorset County Hospital in the UK. Very stunning, and congratulations for winning UK IBD Nurse of the Year. In this testimonial, the goal is for her to share her experience using IBDoc in her clinical practice, and she also has some new results of a study that she's just completed and has submitted, I believe, for next year's ECHO. If you ever want to go back and look up her presentation, you can ask me for a poster or ask Pearl for the poster, or we house her presentation on our website, on our IBDoc website. So without further ado, here's Pearl Avery for her testimonial.
Hi. Thanks all for attending. Like Barb, I've never done anything like this before. It feels like an out-of-body experience, but I'll do my best. Could you move forward on the slides, please? So I just wanted to talk about our first experience with IBDoc. As you're aware, our healthcare system's very different over here, and as Colin's already said, that we don't get any funding for these IBDoc tests from pharma companies. So the first thing I had to do was prove that these tests were going to be of value to the health service. And our current patient population is 1,600 patients to 3 IBD nurses and 1 IBD gastroenterologist. So we have a big patient population, ever increasing burden of care needs. So when we first brought up the Calprotectin test to the trust, so they were keen, they were interested, but they wanted to see that it worked. So we were able to show in our first little trial that the IBDoc did add value to patient care. It enabled us to make very quick treatment decisions, which saved at least 1 hospital admission during that small trial. That was only 16 tests that we actually carried out. And patients that we asked on a short survey monkey questionnaire reported that they really liked it and they felt it enhanced access to their care. So the real potential alongside remote monitoring using digital tools is still emerging for us in the UK, and we're just about to start trialling a digital patient portal for all other aspects of care. And I know that we're trying to work at integrating those portals together so that we don't have to access too many different sites. But this, we hope in future will sort of increase flow through our IBD patient clinics. Can you move on, please? So I just want to get a quick up-to-date experience of we had a quick audit, because again, we have to continually prove our value for this particular test. And so a retrospective audit of the last sort of snapshot of IBDoc results that had come through from our patients to see if they'd had flexible sigmoidoscopies or colonoscopies, and also just look at their general outcomes and whether the test actually helped with that. So we had a look at the patients that we had. We were 134 patients signed up to IBDoc. We've had 23 of those patients over the years. I say that's 2.5 years now we've been using it. So over the years that have failed to carry out tests, and that's multiple reasons. Sometimes it's about technology, sometimes it's about patients actually changing their mind, but we'd already set them up on the portal. So there were 6 patients that happened with. We did have, unfortunately, a very exuberant healthcare professional in the team who liked to give out the tests 2 or 3 at a time, and we actually had some expiry. So that was a bit of a nightmare from a point of view of wastage. But actually, that's just 23 tests out of over 300 now that we've actually carried out. So it's still a very low percentage overall. So that was reassuring to us. But of those 134 patients, 111 did carry out tests and have carried out tests going through. 80 patients didn't undergo colonoscopy and flexible sigmoidoscopy. And those that did actually had reasonable correlation between their IBDoc results and their colonoscopy results. And where it didn't quite correspond, there was usually a good reason for that. So forgive the crude diagrams at the moment, that some of the labels haven't actually come through on this slide. But if we look at the total number of colonoscopies, around 34. And if you look, we've got going along the vertical edge, you've got the colonoscopy Calprotectin results, and then obviously the colour coding across mimics what the colonoscopy or flexible sigmoidoscopy result was. So for high results, I think most importantly, for high results and for normal results, the severe end of the scale and the normal end of the scale correlated nearly always. There were some normal colonoscopies where there had been a high result, but those high results were accounted for by other causes, so either infection or constipation were the main causes for that. Could you move on for me, please?
Yep.
Thanks. So we just wanted to have a look at the 80 patients who hadn't had colonoscopies, just have a look and see what their outcomes were. And over 40, well, just on 40 patients actually had a normal Calprotectin result. And when we looked at whether they actually had what we needed to do with them, well, because they were well, we needed to do nothing. So very few of them had to have adjustments to their treatments. When they did have adjustment to their treatments, it was usually because of stopping a treatment. So we did stop one biologic, and we did stop patients on azathioprine or mercaptopurine. So again, when you're looking at the moderate results, the decision when it's a moderate result, if they were symptomatically okay, we would just choose to monitor them. If there was any sign of any actual disease activity, we might be proactively escalating treatment. So we're trying to use this test to help us to meet the therapeutic demand of patients, I suppose, hopefully before they even become too symptomatic or unwell. And then we go up to the high Calprotectin results, and you can see there a good correlation between what we actually did for them and the majority of those patients would have had treatment adjustment. None of these patients ended up with, no, that's a slight lie. We had one patient who did end up having a colectomy, and he's our only colectomy this year out of all those patients. But actually using the Calprotectin did allow us to at least try to escalate his treatment before that colectomy occurred. So by the time he went to colectomy, he was ready for that decision, and it all went much more smoothly for him because of that. So if you could just move the slide on again, please.
Yes, ma'am.
So the lessons that we've learned over the couple of years we've been using this is that actually, while the failures are there, they only really account for about 8% of all the tests dispensed. So from a cost analysis point of view, the test is more than paying its way, because if we imagine that for every 16 tests we do, we save one admission, then that's really what we're looking at the moment. And an admission over here for a patient with inflammatory bowel disease often ends up costing upwards of £15,000 a visit. So, and when we look at care for our inflammatory bowel disease patients in the UK and they're well, then we're looking at about £1,000 a year when they're at home. So it's a big difference in costs. So we try and use our test flexibly. So sometimes we have some patients who perhaps aren't as able on the mobile phones. We do have some older folk on the phones as well. We have a large retired demographic in our area as we live down by the seaside. So we do have older folk, but we also have some folk that just really can't get on with the phone side of things. But what we do is give them a kit, ask them to bring us back the whole kit, including a collected sample, using the Calex device. And then the nurses in the clinic then carry on the second part of the test and using the camera and the phone. That actually allows us then to be reactive for all of our patients, meaning I think it feels more equitable if we can do it that way. And it's been really beneficial as well. So obviously audit for us will have to be continuous because we have to keep proving the worth of it. So far so good on that front. I'm just going to say something slightly different to Barb, in the fact that one of our tips over here is because we had a lot of technological problems with the app or with maybe it was people and phones, I don't know, but we'd have some people not being able to get onto the app, but they'd already opened the kit, and that would waste a kit. And obviously, as you can see, cost is a real issue for us. So wasting a kit just that's £30 down the drain. So we encourage our patients to make sure they can log on to the app before they do anything else, before they open the kit. Other tricks that we have also found, and it often depends on the quality of the phone that they're using, but things like making sure that the light that they use for taking the first photo or the camera test is the same as when they take the actual test picture. So that's another hint that we use. But failing that, most of our patients seem to get on really well with it and report no problems whatsoever. So really, that's it in a whistle-stop tour of 2 years' experience, but we're finding value from it all the time.
Wow, thank you very much. Very interesting data. Have you been able to submit that data to any of you or the payees yet for them? Have they had a glimpse at any of that data to get a feedback?
Yes. So not just yet, but yeah, that's next step. So I've got a meeting with the managers next week. That's why I've had to have a week off this week.
Well, good luck with that. That's obviously important. It's interesting that both you and Barb mentioned the camera part, and that's definitely we hear that a lot. People want to take a picture, and it's I like Barb's recommendation in your comment regarding tell them that the phone does the work for you. You don't have to take the picture itself. You and you also mentioned that in the beginning you had some eager beaver healthcare practitioners that were handing out a bunch of IBDocs, and then a lot of them got wasted because the patient didn't do them. How many do you normally hand out to a patient when you first sign them up?
We give them out at one at a time.
Okay.
And that's because we have to be sure that they're going to be used, and we can't have them sitting in fridges going out of date. I think that would be a sort of we'd lose the service. I think we'd lose the ability to use it if we use them in any other way. Right.
And regarding, I'm sorry, I was unclear on the patients that come back with just the calyx. Is that a certain demographic of patients that you don't have them perform the test at home?
No, it's really interesting, and it's that I do a lot of work with digital healthcare over here in the UK, and my experience is it doesn't matter about age; it's more about capability. And there are some people, even in the younger age group, that find things like that may appear, or I don't think it's technical, but some people say, "Oh, it's too technical for me," and they just can't cope with it. And I wonder if that's because of their disease and how they cope with their disease. It's one more thing to do that's related to having inflammatory bowel disease, and that's bad enough of its own. But I don't really know why, but we do have a group of patients that would prefer for us to do the nitty-gritty bit. They love the fact that they can get an immediate result, but they just can't do it themselves.
Do they then, if they do that for the first time and they bring the calyx back and you run the IBDoc in clinic for them, is there any of the patients that have taken on the ability to fish themselves and do it at home in the future, or they?
Yeah, one or two definitely. One or two definitely. But usually, I mean, I have to say they're probably, if we said that most of those patients that we have to do this for are those patients that have perhaps had IBD for a very long time and are very used to having care done to them rather than doing care for themselves. And I think that's something that's changing in our health service, that we're trying to support self-management as much as possible, which is why this kit is perfect for some of our patients that really embrace that.
Well, thank you very much, Pearl, Barb and Pearl, both of your testimonials. Last year we had Alana Carter provide a wonderful testimonial, and she opened up similar to you guys, both hesitant in the beginning, and then also Dr. Samuel Fassi presented a wonderful perspective on how he uses IBDoc, and then Vivian Wang, we presented Dr. Wang's information and tips and tricks, but you guys did a wonderful job, and the comments and the insight you had offer obviously a lot of different perspectives. I think the bottom line is the enthusiasm with which you guys care for your patients and are trying to do just that, provide them the autonomy to have their own testing to identify symptoms versus real is a testament to how well the test is working for you.
Brilliant.
So if anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot us a question through the app on your phone, on your computer for the GoToWebinar in the questions folder or raise your hand. If not, then I'll jump on to the next slide after the open mic. And if at any point there is an open mic, if there's any questions that pop up, we'll try to answer those questions or try to get the discussion flowing. So the next portion of the IBDoc Talk is the frequently asked questions section. So again, these are a little different than last year's, but what if I do if a new user's email activation is expired? So whether that's a new patient or a new clinical user or one that has lost their password, then there's multiple utilities for this. How does Buhlmann communicate IBDoc updates? We definitely have IBDoc updates and Cal updates, and we want to make sure that there was been a lot of questions about who receives those questions and the update information. And then this is a big question we receive ourselves, and I know that a lot of healthcare practitioners, after the patient walks out and then the patient calls back and says, I've received my IBDoc test, but I don't know what to do with it. And I think a lot with Pearl, the way she dealt with it was having the patient bring the Calyx back and walking them through how to do the test. But we have a slide here to try to prevent that from happening or how to help the patient. So for activating an email, as all the clinical administrators are probably well aware, and hopefully most of the clinical users, when you sign a patient up or you sign a clinical user up, an email is automatically sent for them to create a password, and that password logs them into and ties them into your portal, which expires in 72 hours. And the same thing if you request a password reset, the patient or the clinical user should receive an email with it pretty instantaneously, and that expires within 2 hours. If at any time anybody wants to reset that password, it's pretty simple. You want to go to IBDoc.portal.net, and if you don't remember that URL, it's pretty easy to just search Google for IBDoc Portal, and that URL pops up. And then enter your email address into the screen. Click Forgot Your Password, and that'll bring up another page where you retype your password and click Reset the Password, and then you'll receive an email. So in this case, I received an email within about 10 to 20 seconds asking me to reset this password. So I can do this for anybody at any time. So if I wanted to reset Pearl's passwords, I could type in Pearl's email address here and click Reset Password, and she would receive an email to reset her password. Again, she does not have to reset her password. If she already likes it, she'll stay with it. But it's a good way to, if you're not sure if somebody's received the email, if they're concerned it went into spam, then you can resend an invite to them so it's at the top of their inbox. By the way, last year at this time when we had the IBDoc Talk, there was a very high percentage of all those invites that went to spam and or the junk folders. Luckily, all the people back at Switzerland, Christian Reinhardt and Romain and Leslie, all the people on the back end have done an enormous amount of work to reduce the frequency with which those emails to go to spam. So that should be less of an issue these days, but there's multiple utilities for resetting the password. So when there is an IBDoc update, so whether or not there's a software update or if there's any portal downtimes because of some construction that we're doing on the back end, or if there's any CalApp updates, Buhlmann support, so support@ibdoc.net, you'll receive an email from support@ibdoc.net, but that email will, right now we currently only send that email out to the clinical administrators and the clinical contacts with each portal. So just in case you're not aware, in this situation, both Pearl and Barb are both clinical users and clinical administrators. But if you have a clinical user that wants to receive that information, right now they're not receiving it. To update just a reminder, the administrator is the same email that's identified when your portal is first registered, and the clinical contact is a separate email that's used when the clinical account is created. It's important that if there is an update that any of the clinical administrators receive an email from IBDoc support and they think that it's relevant to their clinical users, please forward that email on to your clinical users and or your patients if you feel it's necessary. We heard it pretty early on that not all the clinical users and all the patients wanted to receive emails from us every time there's an update. So hence, we only send the emails to the clinical administrators and the clinical contacts. So if you feel you want to be added to that distribution list, if you're a clinical user with one of your site and you also want to receive any update emails, then please send us an email to let us know about that. We could add you to that distribution list. If you are so willing, then you can, a lot of the times, the clinical account information when it's first set up, the site set up, the clinical email address is one that it also ties with the clinical administrator. But if you want this information to be sent to another clinical user, then you can put that clinical user email in here as the account information. So this is the only spot in the IBDoc portal where an email address can be duplicated. So you can put an email address in here. It's not going to affect their normal clinical user profile. And lastly, I received an IBDoc and I don't know what to do with it. I assume quite a few of you have received a phone call from a patient or an email. Let me just introduce the intended use that comes with the IBDoc test kit. So when we submitted this to Health Canada, this is the intended use, and it does say in there that the IBDoc is an assay developed for self-testing and for home use tests for trained patients age 12 and above that are under the care of a healthcare practitioner. So the key word there is trained patients. So trying to make sure the patients have training is important. So to do so, I know there's a large variation with which clinical users do training, as you heard from Barb's clear perspective of how she trains her patients, as compared to Sam Alfassi from last year, as he started doing that and then he just started handing them the flyer and having them go to the website. So there is plenty of resources out there for your patients to train themselves. Make sure that they have compatible smartphones. You can always go to the website, ibdoc.net, and it lists all the compatible smartphones on the website. Please give out the information brochure that we have. That 3-tier flyer is designed for the patient to receive the test kit and receive the 3-tier flyer. And so that should give them autonomy to be able to understand how to go directly to the IBDoc.net to watch the video, as well as a high-level overview of how to run the test. So that's another useful tool. I think all of you have watched the video. The IBDoc website, we try to get people there as much as possible, patients and clinical users and administrators. And I know a lot of you, when every time we train, I always walk through that video, and I think it's a good resource. We are updating this video. We'll have a new version of it next year, just so you know. And then also, please demonstrate using your demo kits. Every time we send out a starter kit, we also send demo kits out. We have a relatively few number of those demo kits, but if you please take care of the demo kits and reuse them, it's a good thing to show the patients so they're not intimidated. As Pearl was describing, the patients walk home and they get scared and they don't want to do their test. Sometimes if they can just see what the tests look like, it takes the fear away and helps them understand what the pieces to the puzzle are. And always email us, ibdoc@buhlmannlabs.com. We can help you out. Bill was there with technical support more hours than she would like to be, probably, but she's very helpful for everybody here. So before we jump to the next section, is there any questions or any hands up? See a shake of the head on the horizontal no. So please feel free to reach out. If not, then you have to hear me keep talking. So sorry about that. So the next slide, which you built to talk about the new updates to come. So we definitely are continuing. Christian and the colleagues back in Switzerland are continuing to evolve the test. We've gone out to do quite a few voice of the customers with some of you in Canada, and we very much appreciate your feedback. Switzerland has heard that, and the development crew has heard that, and we're continuing to try to evolve things. So 3 of the things I want to introduce here for new updates to come are a new information brochure, new IBDoc packaging, and new healthcare practitioner tutorial videos. So the information brochure, which at this time last year was just been released, so it was a relatively new document a year ago, has been well used, and we've gotten a lot of really good feedback from it. The whole point was to try to get the patients to ibdoc.net and watch the video, to provide them contact information on how to find resources, and then also a high-level overview, so they don't they don't actually have to open the package before they can start reading instructions and get an idea what to do. So this is the new IBDoc information brochure. It's exciting because we're almost through with it. We've had a few different iterations, but obviously it looks a lot cleaner, and it's meant to streamline and meant to be more simplified for the patients to read and follow and track their way through how to run the test. So just to go over it, on the outside of this 3-tier flyer, it walks through what the home test is, for a basic level overview of for what calprotectin is, which is very important, and obviously why the doctor is requiring a stool sample. And then there's a QR code, which I'm not sure how many of you use QR codes or not. I was not using QR codes until I realized how easy it was. So basically all you have to do is open up your camera on your smartphone and just literally sign your focus in on the QR code, and it'll pop up and actually bring up the website. So you don't have to download a separate app for QR code recognition. But we're trying to put QR codes in all of our products to get people directly to to the information they need. So on the inside of the 3-tier flyer, we literally walk through the first steps on what the patients need to do, and then the second steps, and then third steps. So and then they also, if they need to, if they haven't downloaded the app, then the QR code is there for them to actually download the app. So if anybody has any feedback, please feel free to get us an email with your requests and what you think works well and what doesn't work well and what we could add. We look forward to coming out with the final version in the next, I don't know, few weeks, month, maybe right after the holidays, and getting those out to all the healthcare practitioners out there. So if you need any of them, feel free to let us know, and we'll arrange to get you some.
Colin, can I just make a comment there?
Yeah, definitely.
Just because we're on the phone anyway. With one of the things I would really suggest, under the stool collection portion on the inside of this new brochure, where it says wait 2 to 24 hours, can we bold that and make it very, very visible? Because it's not visible and people miss it.
Yeah.
Yep. And you definitely mentioned that in your...
I've mentioned it numerous times. It needs to be highlighted in a big way that people can't miss that wait 2 to 24 hours. Yeah, so just my suggestion.
So we actually did, since this beautiful image that I have, we have provided other feedback to Switzerland, and I had actually a colleague of mine who was never in IBDoc, and that was what they identified as well. So your voice of the customer was heard by them, and then a colleague that we had. So we gave that feedback, and so they're going to reshuffle this page. So it definitely does say to the 2 to 24 hours before they get to the test collection. So they do see that, and we'll reiterate that because I'm sure Christian will be listening to this audio, and we'll bring that up again. Thanks.
Oh, that's great.
So it's Pearl here. I've got a comment as well while we're on the phone. Save an email. On the outside of the flyer where it says, why does my doctor request a stool sample? I would wonder about changing the language there, because it's not doctors that are requesting anything where we are. It's all nurse-led. So healthcare professional.
Completely agree.
Might
so
be
actually,
better.
I love that, and I thought about that as soon as I read it. Do patients know what an HCP is? What word would you put it there instead of doctor?
Yeah, I think a healthcare professional or care provider. I don't know. Over here, healthcare professional, they'd know who we were.
I mean, healthcare professional would work for us as well. I think you would have to type it out, though. If you said HCP, it would probably, not everybody here would know what that is. No, but if the words were written, they would understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're short on space, you just say, why has a stool sample been requested? It doesn't matter who's requested it.
Mm-hmm. Good
Amanda,
point.
Always so pragmatic. Perfect. So that will definitely be translated.
Lovely.
So anybody else, if you have any other feedback, let us know. Anything on here still, Pearl, Barb, or Amanda?
No, that's kind of all I can see. It looks really good. It's really a nice layout.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it looks very good.
Yeah, the color scheme definitely flows a lot better and hopefully gives a lot of drives the eye to where you want to go. That's the goal. So I totally get the point about the weighting and the organizing, getting it down. The app in front of the stool collection is important as well.
Yeah, it would almost be really good. I know that the pictogram, I've said we use the pictogram a lot out of the kit. However, this is better, isn't it? Because it's got the pictures and the words. It's a shame that this just can't go in the kit rather than having to give them out individually.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It would be nice. Unfortunately, that wasn't submitted, so that it is definitely meant to go have the healthcare professional provide it with the kit. Unfortunately,
okay.
So for those of you who don't know, this is the current blister pack of the IBDoc, and there's a new version coming out, which we're excited for. So you'll be seeing this in the first 3 to 6 months of 2020. So the goal was, number one, to get rid of plastic. So we got rid of the blister pack packaging and put it in cardboard, because cardboard is recyclable. Cardboard actually also allows us to put a QR code on the outside. So it allows the patients to go directly to the website and or to the videos, I believe. Okay. And also, if there's any other branding or any other documentation you want to put on the outside, that'd be good for labeling, so there's more space there. And then the other main thing is the calyx now comes in a sealable pouch, so the patients will have to open up the sealable pouch just with the calyx, just like they do with the lateral flow cartridge. So if you see a difference, that'll be coming out. Don't be shocked, and we're excited for it. And Christian and Romaine back in Switzerland have been listening to a lot of the voice of the customers and a lot of the feedbacks. And one of the first things that Romaine did, one of the colleagues back there as one of the product managers, was develop some more online tutorials for healthcare practitioners. So the IBDoc.net website, we always try to get everybody to, whether or not you're a patient or a clinical user or a clinical administrator, but now there's more content directly for reminding healthcare practitioners about how to register a clinic if they're a clinical administrator, how to create a new clinical user, or how to manage a clinic. And each one of these videos are about 1 minute to 2 to 3 minutes at most, but they literally walk through all the steps on a recorded video with text walking them through each one of the navigational points to do one of those components. And for the clinical user, there's a reminder there how to create a patient, how to reset a password, and how to review results. So as the portals expand, we usually start out by training one clinical administrator and maybe, if we're lucky, one clinical user. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you have 2 or 3 other clinical users in a portal that are using IBDoc that didn't get the initial training. So it is a train the trainer method here, and obviously all that information is not going to be able to be recalled. So we're trying to put as much videos content online, so we as it expands, that your clinical users and clinical administrators can get updates if they forget how to do something or if they want to learn how to do something new. So if anybody has other ideas on other videos that would be functional for clinical administrators or clinical users, please feel free to let us know. So one last chance of an open mic, and then we'll, any feedback there? Again, I see the horizontal shaking of the head. So we have a great audience, and there's a lot of mutes. I see a lot of attentive audience. I don't see a lot of non-attentive audiences. So people are listening in, and any feedback, let us know. But if not, two great perspectives here, which I try to bring to all the congresses, and I think are just fabulous points of view, similar to the testimonials that Barb and Pearl provided, but they're in paper format, and we can send them out to everybody. So this first one is pretty amazing. This is from a guy in the UK named Lee Stanley, and he describes, so Amanda Appleton in the UK put this together, and it's a great perspective from a patient's view on how he uses Calprotectin and how he uses IBDoc. And he has a blog on his Crohn's disease, and he is very much an advocate for other patients with IBD. So in this perspective of his long-term Crohn's sufferer, he identifies how he manages manages the disease. So some of the highlights I'd want to point out on this, and if anybody wants a copy, let us know. It's downloadable from our website, but I can send you a PDF if you want. So it says, on my quest to control my Crohn's disease through diet, I have used Calprotectin tests to effectively monitor my Crohn's symptoms over the some of the other highlight points. I was well-ish if I could keep my Calprotectin 50 to 250, similar to the numbers that Pearl and Barb were talking about. And the very interesting point, if I introduced a food over a week that created inflammation in my gut, the Calprotectin results into up to over 1,000. This is from a patient. This is not from a healthcare practitioner. So now when I do Calprotectin test, currently managing via diet and vedolizumab, assuming that I can get the Calprotectin to as low as 50, I know I'm not increasing the length of inflammation in my bowel. The number one thing for me since beginning the IBDoc trial for 1 year is that I found that my anxiety levels have dramatically decreased, which helps here. I'm also very mindful that my fantastic GI group, our team, don't have the resources to be on hand 24/7. So that pain I had felt last night, or that extra trip to the loo, now doesn't result in me calling my IBD nurse for reassurance she can't give me. So on reflection, I haven't called my IBD nurse since I began the IBDoc trial. So I know a lot of you get calls from the patients and a lot of feedback on symptoms when they don't know if it's symptoms or if it's real flare. And obviously this patient is utilizing the test just for that. So it's a great perspective, and it could be great for patients for you guys to hand out to them to utilize their own tool. The next perspective is an advanced nurse practitioner on the benefits of patients and healthcare staff on routine IBDoc use. So again, this is from our ambitious colleague in UK, Amanda Appleton, working with Alpha Laboratories that worked with this site at Mercy University Hospital. It's a very good perspective, and actually a study from a poster that was presented on some of their colonoscopies on using a presentation on IBDoc. And since using IBDoc, we get less calls in the helpline because we can check them ourselves if they are concerned they are flaring. Similar to Lee's statements before. Patients love IBDoc and have become reliant on it for self-management. For some high-level highlights, this was the first hospital in Ireland to introduce IBDoc. They've been doing it in routine since 2015. They have over 650 patients regularly using the IBDoc system. They do use a lab test for screening for the initial IBD diagnosis. And once diagnosed, their goal is to try to get them to use self-monitoring with IBDoc. They indicate to the patients, we use IBDoc to monitor the disease, and we explain that without that, they will require colonoscopy. So obviously a little bit of a motivation there for the patient. And as a general rule, the baseline level and initiating their treatment and retest every 4 months. Fourth is they're having any symptoms. Amanda, do you have, or anybody have any updates or anything to add regarding some of this presentation perspective?
No, I think only that they're over 700 patients now, and yeah, they love it. Their biggest issue is trying to get funding for it, which is, I think, probably everybody's challenge, to be honest. But yeah, they were initially skeptical, but very quickly came round to the IBDoc and they've embraced it wholeheartedly.
So funding is not just a Canadian thing. It's not just an Ontario thing. It's an international for Calprotectin. But amazing how much has changed over the last 10 years. That's for sure. And we look forward to helping that evolve. So thanks, Amanda. That makes sense. So if anybody has any questions, again, let me check back in with the monitor of the hands up tech questions. We have. It looks like we're 3 minutes overdue, so if anybody wants to go over or wants to walk through or wants me to send any of our publications, please let us know. We have a routine list that we hand out to everybody that tries to overview all the publications. We have a lot of recent publications that we, this one was presented at ECHO in 2019 of a comparison of face-to-face care versus IBDoc and their own IBD score system for symptoms, and that video is on our website. And then there's also a great poster and publication now on PLOS1 with comparison of IBDoc to other at-home tests, and we're more than welcome to share that with everybody at their convenience. In lieu of time, I will close up and ask if there's any questions, but I do want to reiterate to everybody that if there's any ideas that anybody has out there in Canada for testimonials or perspectives or studies, it would be great to improve the amount of posters and presentations that are out there from your perspective on IBDoc, similar to what Pearl submitted to ECHO for this year and last year, and what you saw with the other presentations at ECHO. We'd love to be able to work with you on doing any sort of in-house studies for IBDoc at CDDW or anything else that you could think of, meeting of the minds.
Maybe we could do some transatlantic studies. We could put our heads together and put some figures together for something.
That would be wonderful. I know I'm willing to work with anybody on that's interested from this side of the pond. So if there's no other questions, I very much want to thank Stacy Smith for putting everything together, coordinating all the logistics, the website, and all the communications to everybody. Thank you very much, Barb, for your time. I know you're super busy, and it took a lot of, and this was a last-minute request, so I very much appreciate you stepping up to the plate here. Pearl, Avery, very much as well. It's nice to have a contribution from the other side of the Atlantic, and I do know that you collaborate and communicate with a lot of the IBD nurses in Canada, so I think there'll be this is maybe a good way to open up some more communications and perhaps collaborations. Thank you to Amanda very much for putting this together, and for all the work that's done in UK and Ireland, and for the enormous amount of resources that's on their website for Calprotectin and for IBDoc. Anybody has any questions, please contact us at ibdoc@BÜHLMANNLabs.com, and have a good rest of your morning and or afternoon and almost evening for you up there, Amanda and Pearl.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.